My name is Steve Hurley. I am a Senior Advisor to CDC Development Solutions. I've been working with them for a number of years. I've been involved in this conference, in the benchmarking study for the last 4 years. How many of you were at our first conference 4 years ago? Then you remember me when I had a full head of hair. You remember those days? I know, it was a few days ago. But now, more importantly for this benchmark study, this study is really a mirror for all of the companies in the room that already have programs out in the field. We decided as an organization we would go out and collect information about what you're doing, how you're doing it, why you're doing it, and aggregate it so you can use that to compare yourselves to everyone else in this practice area. So I do want one more round of applause. Those that contributed to this study, please stand up. And everyone in the room, thank them for the effort they made to fill out this study. And let me apologize to all of you for the harassment and the badgering I gave you to get your data in so we could work it. But it is, from our point of view, this is a really important study to understand what the trends are and where this whole practice of international corporate volunteerism is going. I have, I think, around 15 to 20 slides. Because of time, I will go through them and not take questions, but please, if you have a question, write it down, and I hope at the end we have time for some Q&A to go into that. But that's probably the best way to do it given where we are this morning. So let's jump right into it. So this is our fourth study, as I mentioned, and every year we continue to get more robust numbers. We continue to refine it. Approximately the same number of companies were in this study as the last year. We are up from the first year where we only had 10. That was very embryonic. Now we've got, I'll show you very, very soon how many we have, which is much more than that. We continue to change it, we tweak it, and we make it better every year. So there are some questions, especially on metrics and evaluation, an important issue for all of you that have these programs. We want to get deeper and deeper, so this is an attempt to try and get to some of that. Here are the companies that are in it. We have 22 companies that participate in the study. Again, one more thank you for those that made the effort and took the time to fill it out and give us the data. This is not the entire universe of companies that are out there doing skill-based service, or ICV, whichever term you want to use. But we don't know of a lot more. We know of maybe a half a dozen more. Okay, let's stretch it to 10. So it's still a pretty small universe, but we do see it growing, and you'll see that in some of the data. The focus of this study isn't on international volunteerism. That's a very broad topic. This is on international corporate volunteerism, where in fact your employees move from one location geographically and volunteer someplace else. That's typically across a border, not always, but that's sort of this concept of cross-border ICV as opposed to the broader concept of volunteerism. All the companies in this study, all the companies, and I presume virtually everyone in this room is interested in that niche or that subset of volunteerism that I'll be describing. So understanding the data when you look at it, some of the questions allowed multiple response. So some of you that pride yourselves in your math and you say 50%, 30%, 20%, 40%, whoops, not 100. That's for a good reason. We did allow multiple answers. There are notes on some of the slides which basically pull out some important, relevant, interesting aspects of that data. And finally, we have arrows that show the indication of the trend going on that particular issue. So here are three major conclusions. Even though a lot of companies aren't coming up with the quantitative data that they would like to understand the impact of their programs, they're very confident that the benefits are just kicking butt over the cost of what they're doing. The benefits are truly far outweighing the costs, and they're very proud about this. I'll sort of give you the end point here. There's a slide towards the end where we ask everyone, how satisfied are you with your program? It's off the map. And I'll show you that later. The major benefit to the companies is improving the skills of your volunteers. And in that skill area, and we offered you 3 or 4 different options plus another, leadership just popped out at the top by far. And another major difference, one of the deltas between this year and last year, is the increase in your programs where you're sending volunteers from multiple countries on the same project at the same location. So those are three of the major observations or conclusions that we pulled out of it. So here's the trend in this practice area. These are new companies that are jumping on board every year. Now, you'll see the title sentence there has been steady but slow, and that's an editorial comment from me. I am personally unhappy with this growth rate. When I listen to the speakers, when I look at this report, when I see the huge benefits of this, I don't know why we don't have an N of 50 or 100 or 150 companies that are in this game. We had a meeting with the ICV Council yesterday, and we had time to talk about that, and a number of interesting ideas came up as to how we can get greater visibility around these programs, how we can make them more, make everyone understand the tremendous benefit for the cost, and how we can get these numbers to go up faster than 3, 4, 5 new companies in this game every year. Who runs these programs? As you can see in this data, a little over 50% of the programs surveyed, they are run out of the Office of CSR or Community Involvement. Now, when you add on top of that another 20% in HR, that's pretty much, it's not the entire world of who runs it, but certainly those are the two main areas. A little bit, as you can see, at least one, maybe two companies said we have it in our operations and our business units, which I think is an interesting place to place it. Now, NGO partners are playing a more and more significant role in making these programs successful at both, well, not both, all the way from the initial design activity downstream to getting the volunteers back home and helping them get incorporated back into the company. So the NGO implementer, now let's be careful on terms. NGO implementers are very different than the NGO recipients, or maybe your partner on ground in the country that you're sending the volunteers that are getting the benefit of the service provided. So this slide indicates those that are in fact assisting you in the implementation of the program. Another thing to note on this, on the right-hand side, in terms of what are they responsible for, there has been a shift. In the last 2 years, there were more items under full responsibility than there is today. A lot of that is shifted down to shared responsibility. Frankly, I think that's where it should be. These programs are better run if, in fact, you, the sponsoring company, the funding company, in fact, is hand in hand with the NGO implementer rather than just handing it off to them. How do you select the people to be a volunteer? How do you put your teams together? What are the criteria that make it really, really important that you get the right people? And as you can see in this slide, right at the top is you're looking for people with real leadership potential. Again, I'll go back to our conversation with the council yesterday where we had a chance to really have a thoughtful conversation around a lot of these. There were two interesting schools of thought here. One school of thought said, well, our company feels if we're investing this kind of money and time, we want to make sure it's on the people that we think will be leading our firm in the future. We want it on the people that will get the biggest impact and payback for. Others said, well, you know, there's a lot of, in the term I heard, that was diamonds in the rough. There's a lot of people that may not be shining today, but let's give them a chance to do that. So they are a little more open-ended in terms of who they bring in as volunteers. Now let's look at what do you do with your volunteers before they are sent off on their assignments. And so we looked at what do you train them in, and how do you train them, or do you train them? Is it a simple orientation? Is it really skill training, et cetera? And so again, what you have told us that most of the time, most of the programs don't have a combination of virtual and face-to-face as you see here, that you're doing one or the other. You've either got an orientation program where they come in and it's face-to-face, or you do it all virtually. And as you can see, some of them do combine both, but the majority says, well, you know, we actually do one or the other. But down at the bottom, I found that actually a little more interesting in terms of virtual versus face-to-face. How long do you train them? How long do you want them in your orientation activity? And you can see the range was very wide. Probably more interesting is the average. So when we looked across all of the companies, we actually threw out one because it was such a huge outlier. But around 3 days of training seems to be the average in getting your volunteers prepared to get on a plane and go overseas for some kind of volunteering activity. What did they learn? What was important for them to know and understand before they made that trip? Well, right at the top, not surprising, let's make sure they are safe. Let's make sure they are secure. Let's make sure that there are no issues, whether it's negligence, whether they are violating corporate policies, whatever it is. We want them to go, have a great experience, come back, no problems. The second one is culture. Again, to me, not a surprise. That cultural sensitivity would be important to at least have some kind of discussion, if not training around for a couple of days before they leave. When they come back, what do you expect of them? What do you want them to do? Well, most of the companies expect them to share their experiences with others inside the company, as you can see here. And I'm sorry for some of the small print. I'm sure you can't read it from the back of the room. But at the top was, well, we do expect them, either formally or informally, to share their experiences across the firm. So we looked at that and we said, okay, if you do expect that, what does that mean? Well, we want them to write reports, a formal report that we can share in our department, across departments, different BUs, geographically, whatever. We want them to blog. We want them to talk about something a little more experiential, a little more personal. We want them to meet with our senior management team. The senior management team is invested in this, both financially and in terms of our brand. They want to hear about it, so we expect them to do that. And finally, webinars. Webinars, as we all know, is a very inexpensive way to broadcast and get information out across companies and other types of organizations. So those were the ways that most of you are saying, this is what we want the volunteer to do when they get back into the shop. Where are you sending your volunteers? Well, from our count, around 64 countries have had programs over the past 5 years by the participating companies in this survey. There were a few new ones, not many. I believe there are 4 new ones this year. Namibia, Angola, Argentina, and Swaziland were countries that had not, according to our knowledge. Now, again, I will say this one more time. This is not the total universe of information, I'm sure, but in terms of what we've received from everyone who's taken any of these surveys for the past 4 years, those are new countries to have some kind of ICV activity. And as you can see on the left side, what continents and the number of countries in each one. So the predominant area is Africa, and then followed by Asia for volunteer programs. How many volunteers have been out there? We've asked you, all of those that did the survey, every year, how many volunteers are you sending into the field? You can see there's a steady rise. About 1,700 were in the field last year, which is good. And as you can see, if you go back to 2008, we could only count 375. So, that's a huge increase. Here's my personal goal. I want that to hit 10,000. I think that there's no reason why we shouldn't have that many volunteers. Peace Corps is putting out 8,000 volunteers around the world. What we can do in the ICV world with corporate intelligence and brains and capabilities, I think we can certainly match that. So we continue to grow, but let's see if we can keep that number growing even faster. How many volunteers are assigned per company? Well, you can see most of the companies are, at this point, designing programs and sending out up to about 50 volunteers. And so each of the letters represent a different company in the survey, and you get all the way out to O, and it's 50, 75, 80, and then we've got a huge spike by 2 companies that have huge programs. So around 20 of these, 20, 21, 22 of the programs are certainly between the 10 and 100 range, and mainly 10 to 50 actually. Where are the volunteers coming from there in the program? This is, as you remember, the three conclusions of the study. One of them was that we're seeing more multinational teams, volunteer teams going out. And I think this substantiates this, that again, here's an indication of the number of countries from which volunteers are coming that are going out and doing ICV type of cross-border volunteerism. Now, this is a new question this year. We did not ask that, but there seemed to be high interest in terms of, well, what are the teams like? What are they comprised of? Who's on the teams? So here's two data points that I hope you find interesting. Number one is 2/3 of you said that we don't send individuals, we have team-based projects. Okay, how many on each team? Well, most of those, as you can see, 50% of those have at least 10 per team. Now, if you add the blue and the turquoise, you're up to about 90% have somewhere between 1 and 20. But half of you have somewhere between 10 and 20 volunteers per project team. Now, what makes these successful? This is always one of my most favorite questions to ask and to see what the results are. And these are in sequence. In other words, number one on here got the most frequent number of responses in that category. So the most important thing that you feel for a successful program is to select the right employees to participate. So that getting the criteria right and then mapping that and matching that with the right employee is huge for success. Once you've done that, make sure that you have great program design. Are the objectives clear? Are the goals clear? Do you know what you want the outputs to be? Once you have that, getting the right help to implement it was number 3 from everyone that participated. So those are your 3 success factors. I think they're reasonable. They aren't that different from the past, so the storyline isn't changing. So those of you that are thinking of a program in the future, here it is. Here's your roadmap. We talked about the criteria for selecting volunteers to go, and if you remember, right at the top was leadership potential. Well, now look at the other end. What are the benefits coming back? And as you can see, a list of potential benefits here that we gave you 6 or 7 options. And by far and away, boy, that blue bar going across to the right that's associated with leadership skills is very big, or professional skills, actually. Let me be a little more precise on that. So it's the professional skills of your employees that you're sending out. You're saying that's a huge delta from where we were before we had the program. So we took each of these and we said, okay, that's interesting. Let's drill down a little more and find out what these really say. We asked about what are you doing in measuring social impact? The needle hasn't moved much here. And I think there's a lot of room for us to share information, look at best practices, and find out new ways to really understand what the social impact is of what you're doing out in the field. Half of you are doing it, and half of you, we didn't ask, are you satisfied with it? Do you think you're getting the right results? But you're at least confident that you have something in place where you're measuring that difference. So that's on the social impact. Now, what about the impact on your company? Well, this is the one I was referring to. So around, what's that, about 55%, 58%, so almost 60% say, yep, we're measuring the impact on our company. And here at the top is leadership development skills. And below that is staff retention and then identification of new opportunities on the way down. The arrows, as you see, indicate the shift from last year. I wouldn't put too much emphasis on that simply because the N, or number of companies in the survey, is relatively low. So it doesn't take too many to shift to have a relatively big change or delta between last year and this year. But that being said, clearly leadership development skills is riding away at the top. Now, here's the slide I was referring to. Now we drilled down in 5 areas in terms of benefits to your corporations, your organizations out of these programs. And we gave you at least 4 or 5 options to choose from. So on the right-hand side is the one that was the top vote getter, if you want, or the most frequent responses in each of these areas. So for employee development, leadership was runaway. We had things like team building and entrepreneurship, et cetera. But leadership skills development and leadership experience is the runaway winner in terms of the most important benefit. Employee sat, what do they get out of it? Well, the ability to use their skills in a new and different way. In terms of talent management or HR management, what are you getting out of it? Well, you feel that employee motivation is coming up and commitment to your company is also rising and coming up. Let's go to the business side. That's all the employee, sort of the HR, that's a skill side. How is it impacting your business? Well, in terms of business, the number one factor that you mentioned was insights into how your products and services play in that emerging market. Do you have to tailor it? Do you have to customize it? What's the ability to take your products and services in as they are, or do you have to adapt? The last one is corporate social responsibility, and obviously that's important since if you remember, half of your programs come out of that office. They're looking for substantial improvements in the welfare of these local communities. So again, the drill down shows that these are the areas where you feel you're getting the most benefit out of these programs. This is, I think, a great slide. Now, you have to remember, we're talking about programs that in terms of cost or expenses to companies like PepsiCo and IBM and SAP on down, it's non-existent. It's the shavings off the end of a pencil in terms of everything. But look at the visibility they have inside the organization. So nearly 50% of you say, our CEO is fully aware of our program. In fact, again, at the council meeting yesterday, there were a number of companies say, well, not only are they aware, but they are a huge emotional and vocal supporter of our program. Again, for dollars spent versus impact internally on your firm, impact on the local communities in which you work, and impact in terms of brand, it's a no-brainer. If you combine, again, the turquoise and the blue at the C-suite, now you've got 80% of the companies that took the survey say that our program is known, has visibility, and people at the C-suite care about it. Again, that's incredible support given the size and the budgets that these programs are. All right, last slide. You like it. You're happy with it. They're delivering, it looks like, if I can interpret, almost three-quarters of you gave you the highest rating that you had available, 5 out of 5. So if this were on Yelp, the restaurant would be flooded with new visitors every day for the next year. Again, if I correlate the CEO interest, if I correlate how you feel the benefits are and the success of these programs, it does not correlate well to the growth of this activity across multinational corporations. Again, we had some discussions around that yesterday with some ideas to maybe pump that up a little bit.